Books on Tape presents The Final Days, The Last Desperate Abuses of Power by the Clinton White House, by Barbara Olson. Read by Kimberly Schraf. A note from the publisher. Barbara Olson was killed on September 11, 2001, when the airplane she had just boarded for Los Angeles was hijacked by terrorists and crashed into the Pentagon. She had finished this book, and we had completed the editorial and pre-publication work on it the week before she died. The book had been sent to the printer, but the presses had not started rolling. Advance orders were huge, and every sign indicated it would be a bestseller, as was her previous book, Hell to Pay. On the Thursday before she died, Barbara came to our offices for a long meeting to plan the promotional effort for the book, which was to include many interviews, talk shows, lectures, and other media events that were Barbara's hallmark. Needless to say, her death presented a difficult dilemma to us. Should we cancel the book, or should we proceed? Would people be interested in the topic after the terrorist attack? Would it be unseemly to proceed with the book under the circumstances? Would Barbara have wanted it to be published without her? After agonizing over the decision, and after lengthy conversations with Barbara's family, friends, and colleagues, we decided that the proper thing to do was to proceed. Though invariably charming and gracious, Barbara was both passionate and courageous. She held strong opinions, and nobody who was in the same room with her ever had any doubt about what she believed. She did not apologize for what she thought or said, and she always spoke her mind articulately and clearly. We imagined what she might have said about the situation the world found itself in after the attacks, and we knew that she would have, as always, voiced her strong opinions. We firmly believe that the last thing she would have wanted would be for us to withdraw the book rather than let her have her final say. Barbara Olson was a champion of freedom, and she was a champion of the rule of law, of the need to maintain a free and civil society by means of a well-defined body of law that protects the individual from government tyranny. That is why she was sufficiently appalled by the behavior of the Clintons in their final days in office to write a book about it, and that is why she believed so strongly in the book you are about to read. The Final Days is vintage Barbara Olson, a frank and hard-hitting book. As we pondered the decision whether or not to proceed with it with her friends and her family, we decided that we could think of nobody for whom a book like this one would be a more fitting statement after being murdered by terrorists than Barbara Olson. Alfred S. Regnery, President and Publisher, Regnery Publishing, Incorporated. The Final Frenzy. Finishing Touches on the Legend. 1. On January 17, 2001, Air Force One lifted off from Washington, bound for Little Rock, Arkansas. It was the last ride as president on the magnificent Boeing 747 for William Jefferson Clinton, the 42nd President of the United States, who had become used to its style, a stratosphere as rarefied as the White House itself. Beyond any of the trappings and benefits of the office, this state-of-the-art aircraft is the ultimate in presidential perks. In addition to all the sophisticated communications gear, here are all the comforts of both home and office. The president, known as the big guy to White House staffers, the big he to interns, has his own spacious one-bedroom apartment in the plane's front section, with full bath and king-size bed. For his entourage, hot meals and drinks are served around the clock. You can lounge on posh couches and snack on fresh fruit, or watch television or first-run movies from the well-stocked library. Nothing is more special than Air Force One. Though he wasn't on board for this trip, former intimate Clinton advisor George Stephanopoulos, once a frequent flyer, observed that Bill Clinton was in his element here. On Air Force One, Stephanopoulos remarked, Clinton patrolled the halls like the captain of a cruise ship. On this final trip, the comparison was no less appropriate, but required elaboration. The president, after all, is the captain of the ship of state. The citizens are the passengers, and for 8 years Bill Clinton had taken them on a relatively safe and prosperous, if tumultuous, ride. His tenure had coincided with a period of prosperity practically unequaled in American history. Unemployment was lower than it had been in a decade. The stock market had skyrocketed, at least until the last 6 months, and the high-tech industry had generated more jobs than it could fill. American currency was strong and stable. Inflation was under control. Most people had forgotten the misery index, the combination of high inflation and interest rates that had plagued the presidency of Jimmy Carter, the nation's last Democratic president. The nation was also at peace. The Cold War had ended before Bill Clinton took the helm, and his presidency had experienced nothing that could be called a major international crisis. Turmoil in the Balkans and Middle East was nothing new. Iraq required attention, but no massive deployment of Americans. There had been devastating, but fortunately isolated terrorist attacks in Africa and in Oklahoma City. But the North Koreans had not invaded South Korea, nor had they lobbed one of their missiles in our direction. Communist China did not invade Taiwan. Libya remained quiet. Wars of insurgency still raged in many countries near and far, but the 60s slogan, "No More Vietnams," had become a fulfilled prophecy. In the new century, the United States stood alone as the only legitimate superpower, with powerful allies in Europe and elsewhere. Objections to American dominance may have been heard in some portions of the world, but Pax Americana had made the 90s the most peaceful decade in recent memory. How much credit to accord William Jefferson Clinton for the peace and prosperity was, of course, a matter of considerable debate. But even his critics acknowledged that his actions and policies had not caused major economic or military disruptions. And no one could deny that Clinton had maintained remarkably high popularity ratings, despite seemingly perpetual scandals and personal crises that were almost exclusively of his own making. On this, his last Air Force One flight, it would have been understandable for POTUS, the President of the United States, to bask in a sense of accomplishment. But the mood was different. As the last grains of sand trickled through the hourglass of his administration, Bill Clinton, the second president to be impeached, was thinking about the miles to go before he slept, the many tasks that remained undone. Was there anything left he could do to pad his legacy? Great deeds to diminish memories of that irritating Monica scandal. Pardons, for example, the ultimate in unchecked and unrestrainable presidential prerogatives. In 1794, George Washington pardoned 2 leaders of the Whiskey Rebellion, Pennsylvanians who had risen up against the federal excise tax. After the War of 1812, James Madison pardoned the pirate Jean Lafitte. Andrew Johnson, in 1865, issued amnesty for ex-Confederates willing to take an oath of loyalty to the United States. After Filipino nationalists had lost a guerrilla war against American control of the Philippines, Theodore Roosevelt, in 1902, issued amnesty for followers of their leader, Emilio Aguinaldo. In 1974, Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon for crimes he may have committed in office. Jimmy Carter pardoned Vietnam War draft evaders and deserters. Indeed, had Clinton been less successful in escaping the draft by devious means, and had he carried out his threat not to serve in the military, he might have been the beneficiary of Jimmy Carter's 1977 blanket pardons to those who went to Canada rather than put on their nation's uniform. George Bush created a huge stir when in 1992 he pardoned Caspar Weinberger, former Secretary of Defense, and several others tarred by the Iran-Contra scandal involving the sale of weapons to Iran and aid for anti-communist rebels in Nicaragua. Previous presidents had exercised the pardon power relatively evenly throughout their respective terms in office, with the usual bulge during the Christmas season. But Bill Clinton had granted few pardons during his early years.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?